Hi, my name is Salma and I come from Palestine. I'm here today to give you a highlight, a glimpse to the reality of how we live in Palestine, in the West Bank, under occupation. Just gonna share with you a little story of where I was born, how I lived, hoping that it would open the eyes of the rest of the world. I was born in Jericho, in the West Bank. Supposedly, I was supposed to be born in Jerusalem, but at that time there was the Intifada, and there was a curfew, and my mother could not reach Jerusalem, so the only option she had was to go to Jericho. And I grew up in a town in East Jerusalem called Gazoje, which is, it's in the West Bank. It's a very complicated place to live in, from the government and etc. And where I lived, our home, it faced a daunting gray wall which separated us from the rest of the occupied Palestine, where we could not reach. Living under occupation, we're forced to familiarize ourselves with the rampant human rights abuses at the hands of the Israeli military. We're forced to put up with humiliation at checkpoints at the hands of soldiers who looked not older than 18 years old, carrying this M16 gun, pointing it at the women and at the children to inflict fear. To the point where we were scared to make a simple movement or even cough, because it would arouse suspicion and then it would give them reason to pull the trigger. Living in the West Bank, of course, comes with its own set of challenges, and I experienced this firsthand. And one of the most prominent examples I can give of the Israeli government's apartheid policies was one time when I had to go to the hospital, and seeing as the health institutions in the West Bank is a bit uneasy, I had to go to Jerusalem, and had I not gotten a permit, I would have not been able to pass. And at the checkpoint, of course, it's not always possible to get a permit, so that always complicates things even more. Me and other Palestinians waiting there, in the heat of a very hot summer day, where we don't have any shelter or any roof to cover the sun. We don't have any access to basic facilities, no bathrooms, not even seats that we can sit on. And we had to wait for what seemed like an eternity, but was in fact only 5-6 hours of waiting for the soldiers to check our IDs and our permits and decide to let us through, if we're lucky enough that day. If not, then we were asked to head around and go back home. People who work in the occupied parts, in the inside Israel, who have to go every morning to their work, sometimes cannot even pass, because at that day that soldier was having a mood swing or decided not to let him pass. Not to mention all this trauma that gets imprinted in the people, physically and mentally, it gets overwhelming. Traveling between cities usually should not take more than 2 to 3 hours, but due to all these checkpoints we have to drive through daily, sometimes it takes 6 hours or 7 hours to get to a city that is 1 hour away. And I don't see how that makes sense. But I can also speak as a woman, as a Palestinian woman, who personally I have been stopped at random to have my ID checked. Usually it's an excuse for extra harassment. I have been strip checked in the middle of the street where I know no one. And their excuse is that I look Arab and I'm not supposed to be here. Where is your ID? What color is your ID? Oh, you have a green ID. Why are you here? Where's your permit? Humiliation to an extent. Now, this was only to highlight the reality of living in the West Bank. Not to mention how brutal living in Gaza is. Doesn't even begin to describe it. The living situation. 2.1 million people kidnapped by Israel and besieged, held captive in an open-air prison for over 17 years. People are not allowed to leave. People are not allowed to flee to find a safer environment. Not allowed food, not allowed water, no electricity. And most importantly, they're not allowed to go back home because they're refugees who had to go to Gaza from Jaffa, from Haifa, by sea in 48. They're refugees, they can't go back home. And 80% of people there are refugees. Life there has become completely unlivable. The bombardment of besieged people is a war crime. Cutting food and water of a besieged population is a war crime. Cutting electricity is a war crime. This ethnic cleansing has to stop. This conflict is not about religion, it's about occupation, it's about power. Occupation denies Palestinians control over basic daily aspects of their daily life, the ability to move within our own cities, the ability to exit and return, the ability to travel, and to build our own lands, to get access to natural resources. Our movement in our own country is controlled by the color of our IDs. I'm standing here today in front of you with my heart full of grief, full of sadness, full of frustration, and full of anger. Watching this genocide of our own people unfold in front of our eyes through a screen, feeling helpless, unable to do anything but speak up. So many feelings that we cannot even express because we feel guilty for feeling this way while they're in Gaza getting bombed, losing their homes, losing their families, and losing their friends. I worry for the life of my friends and I worry for the life of my family. for the life of my friends in Gaza, waking up every day, not knowing whether they're alive or not. It's time for the international community to take notice and to end this injustice. I feel empowered by your presence. I feel empowered by your solidarity. It matters, and it makes a difference. Please keep sharing about Gaza. Please keep sharing about Palestine. Spread the word about all the suffering, about all the systematic war crimes that are being committed. How can you do that? Write, draw, document, pray. Every prayer matters. And protest. And don't be silent. Be a voice for the voiceless. All the heavenly religions that were sent to us were created for the sake of mercy. And in the end, I leave you with one sentence. We dream of a day when all the innocent people will live in peace and security. We dream of a universe in which the innocent of all creation will not be oppressed. Free Palestine.